microwave. Mind your back.
Dominic Lewis and Brian Peters have developed a radical new approach to growing wool.
The whole meal's much lighter if it cools down quickly.
Their theories may revolutionise sheep farming in this country.
Oh, I've put the rug in your knapsack this time.
Thank you.
Dominic and Brian farm a 40-hectare block at Tohora, an hour's drive from Auckland.
Again.
To the casual observer, their farm looks much like any other small New Zealand sheep farm.
You didn't defrost those croissants in the microwave.
But while hard times in the rural sector have caused their neighbours' incomes to tumble, Dominic and Brian have developed a radically new method of wool growing, which has more than tripled their wool receipts and brought them a substantial research grant from the Wool Board.
Come on. Come on. Coming on well.
Yeah.
7 years ago, they were partners in a downtown Auckland hairdressing salon.
Ah! Here we are. Don't drop it.
No, right.
They gave up hairdressing for a more relaxed rural lifestyle, and then discovered that the way emotional and physical stress affects hair condition in people was just the same for sheep. The more stressed the sheep, the poorer the quality of the fleece. Over the last 5 years, they've been developing what they call non-stress farming. This may seem a pleasant way to spend an hour or two. In fact, it's an important part of Brian and Dominic's method. They're spending time letting the sheep become used to their presence. They first notice the effects of stress on hair in their salon.
Well, every good hairdresser knows when a customer's under some sort of physical strain or emotional stress. You see, their hair becomes coarse and it lacks, well, colour and lustre.
Yeah, look, any customer that comes into the shop, you say to them, how do you feel? They'll say, fine. Then the moment you get your hands in their heads, as soon as you start working with it, you can feel they're in an absolutely terrible condition. And suddenly it all starts to flood out. High interest rates, troubles with lifelong partner, everything. You know, I'm never wrong.
Well, it's exactly the same with sheep. If a sheep's under some sort of high, stressful condition, then naturally the wool will be coarse. But if the sheep's a very contented sheep, then naturally the wool will be a lot better.
Just like people.
Exactly.
You see, I reckon that sheep are intelligent creatures, more sensitive creatures, and yet we treat them like concentration camp inmates. Confuse them, terrify them by rounding them up with dogs, jam them into pens, then drag them across the floor, shear them in a couple of minutes, throw them outside, poke a drench gun down their throats, and you wonder they're neurotic.
Oh.
The aggressive bark of the huntaway has no place here. Brian and Dominic are using what they call the soporific voice to bring the sheep in for shearing. The call is based on a meditation mantra.
Leave them alone, and they will come home wagging their tails behind them. A lot of truth in those old rhymes.
We don't think sheep should be mollycoddled. We don't give them names, for example, but we do respect them and their sensitivities at every stage of their wool-growing lives.
And it's really painful in the health of our flock and in the quality of the wool. You know, we're receiving 3 times the normal amount for our wool on the Japanese apparel market.
Dominic and Brian have been using wool testing services in Wellington to assess their wool. They were sure the wool was healthier and finer, but they wanted an independent scientific analysis. Manager Jeff Clark has been very impressed with the results.
When they first started sending their wool to us, we were amazed at the results that we were getting because they were just too fine for the breed of sheep. And I can remember that we tested it 3, 4 times. And it was just amazing. And at that stage, they were getting slightly better than 25 micron for Romneys. And that's very fine wool for a Romney. And just recently, they've managed 20 micron from a Perrendale. And that's as fine as a merino. And the remarkable thing is that they're achieving a luster approaching that of mohair. I'd say that there will be a lot of farmers over the next 10 years or so will be following their methods.
Encouraged by the results, Brian and Dominic are employing and training 2 shearers this year.
So I think the really important thing to remember is time. Take your time. We're not here to see how many sheep we can shear in a day. Remember, this is a really critical time. Any stress now, and we'll get coarse wool next season. The sheep have to be quite relaxed. We'll be using the trolleys and the earphones, so everything has to be done calmly, quietly, gently, smoothly. Now, before we go out and spend some time with the sheep in the yard, Brian, do you want to go over the soporific voice with them?
Yeah, it's very important that you remember it. It's the calming voice. And it goes with those non-threatening body movements, you know, the crouching down that we've shown you. Those things, just keep it going. It relaxes the sheep, it calms them, it assures them that, you know, everything's all right. Now, you can start off, the note doesn't matter, but and then drop it down a note, together.
For experienced shearers John Hodder and Keith Slater, these new techniques require more than just speed with a blade.
Come on, sheep. Want more than $30 an hour for this job?
While John Hodder may have some doubts about his employer's methods, he agrees that stress can be a problem in the shearing shed.
There's a lot of stress, no doubt, you know, from a shearer's point of view. You know, the brute strength and ignorance is not the way to shear sheep.
So Snow Quinn, he never uses strength, does he?
No, our good shearers, look at our good shearers, like go to Golden Shears and see those top shearers at the shears, and you can always pick out those shearers who shear, those intelligent shearers who shear well, make the job easy, who've learnt the right way to do it.
See, I found when you're shearing, you get a sheep and it kicks, you get a bit mad and you give it a whack around the head and you get upset, and sure enough you go in and grab another sheep and it gets upset and you just keep on going. You settle yourself down and get rid of that, I don't know, just sort of, tension, get rid of your bad temper. Everything seems to go along a lot better. I don't know, they could be onto something.
But are they getting a reasonable return for what they're doing?
Oh, you know, out of this, they're going to pay us by the hour, so I don't really mind carrying on with all this nonsense, I suppose. If they're going to pay me $30 an hour, I'm not complaining. Do they think these low-stress techniques of handling sheep really make any difference to the wool? Well, you know, I don't know. First time I've ever come across this sort of thing, but, you know, they're getting a grant from a wool board of $75,000, so they must be doing something right.
Yeah. Got the music right now. Up there. Surf around the bag and a bit on the head, okay? That's what's one left on. Yeah, that's all I want left on.
A smooth trolley ride to the comb is less stressful to the sheep than being dragged backwards across the boards. The harsh noise of the machines is a major source of stress in the shearing shed. Dominic and Brian have solved this problem by putting specially adapted radio headphones on the sheep. These not only cut out the noise, but provide soothing classical music, which calms the sheep. The sheep is not completely shorn. A protective layer of fleece is left around the kidneys and removed later at second shear when the weather's warmer.
Now this, of course, stimulates the follicles. It's just like a scalp massage, really. This soaping solution acts as a lubricant for our hands.
And it guards against lanolin overload.
Contains a very good insecticide, so we just leave it on the sheep's back and let the sun dry it off. Absolutely no need for dipping at all.
Of course, the touch is very important too. I don't think we touch enough. It's very important for the animals and, of course, for people as well. It's the reason I think in a lot of overseas hospitals these days they're introducing pets. They just draw the tension out of patients and people that are staying there. And I know that after we've done an afternoon of this, Dominic and I feel more relaxed than if we'd spent the whole day in the spa pool.
Shampooing replaces dipping and drenching. But isn't all this care and attention too time-consuming?
Well, of course, it's much more labour-intensive, but it's like shearing. They get quicker all the time. We're getting very fast. Now, I reckon that by next season, we'll be, from the time the sheep's wheeled out to us from shearing, we'll be doing them in 3.5 minutes.
Oh, 3 to 4 minutes at the most.
But do farmers have the time for all this?
Well, I believe farmers do have the extra time. I mean, if they stop playing polo 3 times a week and...
Like they do around here.
Yes, and spend some more time with their sheep, and then look at the financial advantage.
3 times the price of your wool.
Ask yourself.
Yes, you end up with much healthier sheep, because if an animal's stressed for a long time, there's a huge adrenaline build-up, and that affects the immune system, and the animal's much more open to disease. Now, one of the major sources of stress during the summer months can just be the heat on top of the beast's head. So what we do is leave a little bit of wool. It's not a very good area for growing wool anyway. And we just leave a little bit there. Now, if we left it thick and matted as it normally is, it would be just as much a problem. It would be just as hot, just as sweaty, and cause just as much stress. So what I do is I just tease and tease and tease it until it looks a little bit like a light, fluffy sun hat.
We leave the wool on these sheep around this area to protect the kidneys, and of course it reduces all the stress that the animal may feel. It also gives us an ideal opportunity to artificially increase the crimp of the wool in this area. Now, by rolling it when it's actually growing, we can actually attain a highly exaggerated crimp, which means that you get an added bulk and softness, but without the extra weight.
Another candidate for the jogging clinic, I think.
The final stage is a quick tone-up with a massager. Dominic and Brian believe that most New Zealand sheep are overweight and out of condition, so they run regular morning jogging sessions for the more unfit members of their flock. While it may be hard to convince conservative farmers of the benefits, Dominic Lewis and Brian Peters' improved wool receipts will certainly persuade many farmers to try non-stress farming.
And that was the final of Country Calendar, always a program that has lots of innovation. Next week it's part 2 of Why Order, and a little screen for the full hour from 7 until 8.
One people